And in this lecture, we're going to look at the upper arm bone, the humerus. Why is it called the humerus? Well, my guess is because it's attached to the funny bone. At least that's how I remember it. So let's take a look at the proximal end of the humerus. The humerus is going to have a rounded area called the head. So this is the head of the humerus. And the head of the humerus is going to point medially. So in other words, it's going to point toward the body because it has to fit into the scapula. And right here, we can see it fitting into the scapula, creating what's called the glenohumeral joint. So glenohumeral joint. Okay. Now, if you think about what attaches your head to your body, that would be the neck. And so we have an anatomical neck right here going around the head of the humerus. Now the humerus actually has two necks. So this being the anatomical neck, but if we come down here and come just below these two big bumps here, we're going to have what's called the surgical neck. So the surgical neck would come across right here. The reason it's called the surgical neck is because that's the area where the humerus is most likely to fracture. Now, talking about those big bumps here, we've got one bump that's larger than the other, and this is on the more lateral aspect of the bone. This is called the greater tubercle. Okay, so greater tubercle. And then more medially, we have the lesser tubercle. So there we go. There's a good view. So the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle. Now in between the two tubercles, we have a groove. Now another name for a groove or a depression is a sulcus. If you think about when you're depressed, what do? You sulk. And so this is a sulcus or a groove. Now in this case, because the sulcus is between these tubercles, well, think about a road that goes in between two states. That would be called an interstate. Well, this is a groove in between two tubercles, so we're going to call it the intertubercular sulcus. The intertubercular sulcus. Another term is because the long head of the bicep tendon goes through here, we can call it the bicipital groove. The bicipital groove. Okay, and as we move down the humerus, a little more laterally, we're going to see this bump here. Let's see if we can get that in focus. That bump is called the deltoid tuberosity. The deltoid tuberosity. It's not really coming into focus too well. There we go. So the deltoid tuberosity. Okay, and of course the deltoid muscle is going to attach to that. You can see it as kind of a little bump here laterally and a roughened area. So just look for the bump and roughened area on the lateral aspect, and you'll find that deltoid tuberosity. Okay, moving down to the end, we see these interesting shaped bones that are going to make up the elbow. Now, the one is round and the other is kind of pulley shaped. Okay? Technically, these are condyles, but they do have a little bit different shape to them, and so we're not going to call them condyles as such. We're going to have special names for them. Because this one is round, okay, so this one is round. It's similar to a head, so we call it the capitulum. Capit means head. You think about it, you put a cap on your head. So this is the capitulum. And then I said this is kind of pulley shaped. The name for pulley is going to be trochlea. Trochlea actually means pulley. Okay. Now because these are technically condyles, we're going to have these areas just kind of above the condyles. And these are going to be called the epicondyles. Okay, so epicondyles. Now this larger epicondyle is going to be the medial epicondyle, whereas this is going to be the lateral epicondyle. Now remember, I kind of made a little joke about it's called the humerus because your funny bone attaches here. Well, what really is your funny bone? Well, that is the ulnar nerve. And when you whack your elbow, you're bumping the ulnar nerve, and that's what gives that little shot up into the little finger. Well, this little groove right here is the groove for the ulnar nerve. As you can see, that nerve would be fairly exposed right there, and that's why it's so easy to whack that elbow and get that little shock into the little finger. Okay, another thing we're going to notice about this is a couple of dents. Okay, another name for a dent is a fossa. And these fossas are created in order to accommodate the ulna. So this is part of the ulna here. Now, the front part of the ulna here, this point is going to be called the coronoid process. Coronoid process. And I mentioned this in another video, the coronoid process, because if you whack your elbow, you're not just annoyed, but you're coronoid. And so that coronoid process is going to need room to be able to bend the elbow. So let's see if we can do this sideways. Okay. So you can kind of see where that coronoid process is going to go into that coronoid fossa. Now that's on the anterior aspect of the elbow. On the posterior aspect of the elbow, we have this lump. This lump actually makes the point of your elbow, and it's called the olecranon. The way I always think of it is if I whack my elbow, I'm like, oh, olecranon. Okay, so I hit my elbow, oh, olecranon. Now I'm annoyed. I'm not just annoyed, I am coronoid. So there we go, the olecranon process and the coronoid process. And I'll be repeating that again when we look at the ulna. But if we look at the posterior aspect of the humerus, you'll notice another divot there, another dent. Okay, and again, a dent is a fossa. So what fits into that fossa is the olecranon process. So the olecranon process. And so we're going to say that is the olecranon fossa. The olecranon fossa. Now going back to the front, we have another smaller dent, which is right over here by the capitulum. And that is going to be the radial fossa. So the radial fossa. And so here's the radius. And the radius, it's called radius because it's round, right? And other than a diameter and circumference, what do you measure on a circle but a radius? And so that's going to allow, let's see, we'll turn it sideways here. It's going to allow for the radial head to bend up in there and allow you to bend your arm at a much greater angle than if we didn't have those fossas. Okay. All right, so how are we going to tell if this is a right or a left? Okay, so a right or a left. Well, we know that the humeral head has to face the body. Okay, so we know that's going to be medially. And so if this is medial, well, is this a right or a left? Well, we need to know the anterior portion of the humerus. How we tell the anterior portion is by looking for these tubercles. Again, if we look for the lesser tubercle, let's see if we can get that in there again. The lesser tubercle is going to be anterior. If it's anterior, and this, the head, is going to point medially to attach to the body, then we know we have a right humerus. Okay? So I hope this helps.